Howdy, everyone. All right, so back at the remake, if you will, of the landing gear, you can see that I've got the wheel tire assembly now permanently installed on the airplane. This is the back side. I've got the new calipers in place with the new brake disc, the wheel, of course, the tire, the tube. Here is the outside bracket and the axle nut, which is also part of the bracket assembly. This piece here, the big hex nut, comes pre-drilled. So if you're like me, I had my old wheel tire assembly in place, and I had that particular axle nut drilled and the axle itself drilled for that setup. So I already had existing holes in my axle. Unfortunately, when I spun both sides, when I spun the axle nut on, these pre-drilled holes in the nut did not line up with the existing holes in the axle. So I had to drill new holes in the axle specifically for this nut. So that's not the end of the world. This is all done now, and everything seems to be just fine. So now I've moved on to the actual wheel fairing itself. So here is the new fairing. You can see it's carbon fiber. It comes in 3 pieces. The tail piece I don't have on yet. The instructions have you bond the tail piece to this middle section. That's the first step. I chose not to do that. I think it's easier to work with these parts like they are without having that added length and bulk of the tail. So just like with the other wheel pants, the original Vans wheel pants, you have to fit the halves together, and you have to pay attention to your seam. You have to do a lot of work to get these things to mate nicely and play nice with each other. These particular wheel fairings come with all the holes pre-drilled. All of these holes are pre-drilled. The attaching holes are pre-drilled. I'll take this apart and I'll show you what it looks like from the inside. Again, holes are pre-drilled. All of these. The cool thing about this is all of these holes, they're not only pre-drilled, but they're pre-countersunk, and they're not machine countersunk. They did not do the carbon fiber and then countersink the holes. The countersunk is actually molded into the carbon fiber. So they didn't take carbon fiber and machine thickness out of it to get the countersink. The countersink is molded into as part of the process, so you don't lose thickness in these countersinks. They're not perfect. I'll get to that in a minute. The areas that need to be cut are pre-marked. You can see a little bit of the yellow here. The cutouts are already laid out for you. And again, they're not perfect. I still have a lot of work to do in this area. This is just some of my preliminary setup. Overall, so here's the caveat, at least for me. I have not started on the other wheel fairing. This is the left wheel fairing. This is the only one that I've been fooling with. The quality is, considering what it is, it's fair. You can see there's some areas like this here that did not get completely formed or completely filled with epoxy or whatever is used. That's not the end of the world because, like I said, the tail cone will go on here and hide all this. But there are areas, there's a lot of pinholes. You can maybe see some here. They're actually not pinholes. They're quite large. And that's pretty common throughout the entire layup. There's some holes and gaps. Not the end of the world. You can see here, I don't know what this is. This is some kind of a repair or some kind of a fix that they had done before they sent them to me. Here are a couple more areas here. I did not do this. This is how they came to me. My biggest complaint with this particular fairing like I said, everything comes pre-drilled. So you put them together and you put clecos in them and you kind of see where your gap is. Now the instructions say that you're supposed to modify this as required to have like a 0.005 to a 0.01 inch gap, which I think is really, really tight. However, this side here, I didn't do anything to this side, and the gap is absolutely huge. It's got to be close to 1/8 of an inch gap. And like I said, that's how it came. I can't make this gap any tighter. That's how it came. I'm not entirely pleased with that, but it's doable for me because I'm hoping I can wrap these with some vinyl so the larger gap is okay. So when I put these fairings together, I basically just tried to maintain that same gap all the way around. I did gradually tighten it up because I think that's just excessive. So the gap all the way around is not perfect. This up here, this gap here is a little bit tighter than that big gap on the side, and then I just kind of maintained that all the way around. It's a little deceiving in the pictures because of the discoloration. This light area is not the gap. The gap is actually inside of that light area, and I don't know how well that's going to show up. Not the end of the world. It's just an observation. Now, the other wheel pans may be a lot better. I don't know. But this particular one, right out of the gate, it already had a pretty large gap down this entire side. And there really isn't anything I can do with it. The fit between the two was fair. I had to do a lot of work to get this kind of smooth. There was quite a big step between the two pieces all the way around. The holes, these holes here radially around the circumference, those did not match up that great. I had to do a lot of work, and I'll show you some of that when I take these apart. The instructions are very clear. They do say, they give you some instruction on how to work that to get everything into alignment. And after having worked it, I was obviously able to get them to come together pretty decent. There's still some steps between the two. Again, not the end of the world. There's a pretty good step right here. But for me, like I said, not the end of the world. Let me get these two halves taken apart, and I'll show you what they look like from the inside. All right, so here are the two halves now taken apart. So obviously this is the front nose area. This is the piece that has the flange kind of built into it. And I had to, kind of like I did on the engine cowling, this face here of the flange, I had to take a lot of material off because it was kind of rough and it wasn't smooth, it wasn't flat. I had to take a lot of material off of this flange all the way around. The step in here, in areas, I had to move that step back just a little bit, and I had to square it up, if you will, because it was kind of more of a ramp. And I had to kind of square it up to get that gap a little nicer looking. These are the integrated holes. These are pre-dimpled, if you will, and pre-drilled. I don't know what to think about the way that they're integrated into the fiberglass. This lip is actually fiberglass. The rest of it is carbon fiber. But the countersink, like I said, is kind of molded in. And I don't know how I feel about that because I think that makes it a little bit more difficult to fit the pieces together. Here is the outside piece. This is the middle piece. This fits over top of the flange, of course. And again, these countersunk holes are molded into the carbon fiber. And you know, they're not very crisp. They're more of just like a bow, and I think that makes it difficult to get this molded in bowl type of countersink seated nicely in with this one, if that makes sense. I think that causes a little bit of a problem. Not the end of the world. None of this is a showstopper. It's just something you have to work through. You can also see where I have sanded this inside edge all the way around. I spent a decent amount of time trying to sand these areas without doing any real damage to the dimples. And again, I just had to do that to take off some material so that when this piece was slid over top of this piece, the seam between the two would be relatively smooth. There wasn't a huge step. And that's where I spent most of my time, working this flange and working this inside area, trying to get these to mate correctly and be able to get clecos into all these holes. Speaking of clecos, another thing that I've noticed is you can see here, you can see how around the hole, like this hole looks pretty decent. This hole looks like it's got some chips and craters around it. Here's another one here, a little bit. Some of these came molded this way. This one is probably the worst one. Some of these came like this where they weren't completely molded correctly. But I've noticed that when I would pull a cleco in and out of here, it would break out some of this epoxy or whatever this coating is. Not the end of the world, because my plan is, since these seem to be so porous and they don't have that nice finish that the Vans cowlings have, or the fairings, they don't have that nice outer finish. Like I did with the inside of the engine cowling, I plan on coating the outside of all of these with a very thin coat of epoxy. And I'll be able to potentially do a little bit of work on these holes that aren't very pretty, like that one. So these two halves are now probably as good as I can get them. They're not perfect. I don't think I can get them perfect without basically trying to reform them. So I'm going to go with these like they are. I'm going to go ahead and continue to open up the opening for the tire and open up the area for the gear leg itself. Try to get this piece fitted onto the brackets. And then once I have that, I'll work on the middle piece, which actually comes in from the back. And I'll work it until I can get it onto the brackets, get screws into the brackets, and get the two pieces connected radially around the perimeter. I'm going to work on that next. Once I have that done, then I can bond the back fin to the center section, and then I'll be able to do my epoxy coating and all of that. So it's a process. It's just like the Vans wheel pans. You got to do a lot of work and a lot of tweaking. The best part about these, which was the big attractor to me, everything is self-aligning. The brackets are pre-drilled. All the attachments are pre-drilled. The fairings themselves are pre-drilled, so they're self-aligning. And it's the same with the leg fairing, which I'll get to later. But since everything is pre-drilled, everything just goes together and bolts together and is self-aligning. You don't have to do any alignment like you do with the Vans fairings, which was a huge attractor to me. And I like the fact that these are bigger, and you can do the bigger wheel and tire brake assembly, which I like, which was the reason I went with this new configuration in the first place. All right, let me get to work on these. I want to get these fitted to the airplane, and I'll talk to you guys later.